Nurses have become increasingly dissatisfied with the implementation of the new award.
Today, about 3,000 nurses packed into the sports and entertainment running high. It came as no surprise when they overwhelmingly voted to strike from the first shift tomorrow morning,
leaving only a registered nurse and a student on duty in each ward.
Beleaguered Health Minister David White.
And the government has warned that striking nurses face being stood down. But Nursing Federation Secretary Irene Bolger says the nurses have reached the end of their tether.
The strike will continue indefinitely.
I solemnly pledge myself before God and in the presence of this assembly to pass my life in purity.
Not an end, but a beginning. Ahead an opening oyster lies the world. All the world has to give is theirs, and all that they are, humbly with dedication, they give the world.
To elevate the standard of my profession, and will hold in confidence all personal matters committed to my keeping, and all family affairs coming to my knowledge in the practice of my calling. With loyalty will I endeavour to aid the physician in his work, and devote myself to the welfare of those committed to my care.
Been soft and politically naive, and I think we've all grown up a lot.
When I started nursing in 1939, the 60-hour week came in, and that was wonderful because you got a day off which you hadn't had before. It was a privilege. Certainly you worked from 5:45 in the morning till 9 at night still.
Be serious, be observant, be silent, sympathize with suffering, respect the art that heals and saves.
Now, nursing had commenced in the convents with the nuns, so our behaviour was based on that, and therefore you stood up always. If a doctor came in, you called him sir. Indeed, you even I made his afternoon tea, and one doctor liked bananas, and I paid for that out of my 10 and 10 pence, which would be, 98 cents now, to buy his damned bananas.
You'll be very pleased to know that everything's going to be all right.
Thank you, sister.
It was going to be all right. And all we could say was, thank you. We'd always be in debt to this quiet team of saviours. They were already moving on to other emergencies, saving life and defeating death. That's when I knew I wanted to be part of it.
I've been nursing about 18 years, 17 or 18, and I really have never agreed with strikes. But I just believe that over the years we've talked and we've talked and we've talked and we've achieved nothing, and this was, to my mind, was a last resort. And I've just seen so many good nurses leave the profession. They've gone to uni, they've gone to William Angliss to do this course or that course because they're sick of being kicked around. They're sick of being in a system that they really enjoy the work, but because there's never enough people to do all the work that's necessary to do, they get jack of it and they leave. And that's really why I'm on strike, because the good nurses all leave.
Nurses' dissatisfaction with their career and salary restructuring package has been growing steadily since the new award was handed down by the Industrial Commission last June. The nurses have 19 objections, principally regarding reclassifications and the number of graded nurses at the lowest pay levels. Today, about 3,000 nurses packed into the Sports and Entertainment Centre to go one step further. With feelings running high, it came as no surprise when they overwhelmingly voted to strike from the first shift tomorrow morning.
I think probably the main issues are those that the media particularly haven't chosen to highlight, and that is the healthcare system of the whole state of Victoria. And I think secondary to that comes a decent career structure for nurses. In the past, particularly in the days when I trained, when the old Florence Nightingale attitude prevailed, you didn't even ask how much money you were going to get, and you certainly weren't going to have a career because you were only a woman and you were going to get married and have kids.
When this little fellow was born, you were part of the team that wrought what never ceases to be a miracle. You vow you love him like your own, and sometimes you dream of having your own, and of how much better a mother you'll be because of your training as a nurse.
From a marriage point of view, we were seen as people who were used to hard work, physical work. We'd been well trained in domestic skills as well as nursing skills. We wouldn't question too much our husband's authority in the home. So we were, I suppose you'd say, marriage fodder.
We were always told that you were there to look after the sick poor, they needed you, and what better way could you live your life than in caring for those. I certainly got board and lodging, but I shared a room with 3 other nurses, and our beds were practically touching. And this was still, if you complained, well, how could you when the sick poor needed you?
Trained, skilled, utterly reliable, the nurse develops both as an individual and a willing servant of humanity. Conscious of her responsibilities, calm and confident in emergency and crisis, her future devoted to an honored service.
We're supposed to be dedicated and live on love. You can't be dedicated and live on love. You can be dedicated, but you have to have money, you have to have a career prospect, and you have to be able to know that you're going to get somewhere.
I've been nursing 20 years, and for 20 years it's been going on. And, I mean, I don't think it's unreasonable that people who've been nursing that long are running out of patience.
It was an emotional moment for some nurses today as they walked off the job at the Western General Hospital. At the same time, Premier John Cain was outlining sections of the Essential Services Act which could be used to bring the nurses to heel.
One would imagine that these threats might have been made by some fringe terrorist group, and it's actually being made by the state government. And all I can say is that each time they come up with another threat, the nurses become more resolute in their action.
Well, it was probably the hardest decision the nurses in that hospital had ever had to make. I mean, you were very mindful of what might occur to patients should we walk out. And, for example, I voted 3 times. I voted yes and then thought no, somebody might die. And so I voted no and then thought no, we have to do this in order to make it better for nurses and patients in the long run. So changed my vote to yes again.
I'm now appealing to nurses to think again about their action. I urge nurses to meet their obligations and put patients first, stay at work, and have the disputed claims sorted out through arbitration. That's the proper and long accepted process for resolving industrial disputes. Now it is time for nurses to give a little.
As far as my position goes, I'm quite well off because I'm a charge nurse, and they did try and downgrade me, but I've got a letter saying I'm a charge nurse and it's all pretty clear cut. But my boss is being paid less than I am under the new award, or the implementation of the new award by the Health Commission. And I'm out here because I really believe it's the future of the public health system in Victoria that's at stake, and it's the future of my career, nursing, that's at stake. And I'm not prepared to give in because I think that the issues are just too important.
There was this sort of historical thing of a build-up of frustration at being exploited for years, striking for the first time in 85, going back to work on the basis that we will do something about it. Then 1986, this insulting decision.
Today, Day, hundreds of nurses voted with their feet and walked off the job. To support them, nurses already on strike marched from the city to St Vincent's Hospital to join their colleagues. The show of strength continued as the group moved on to the Royal Women's, where staff had also gone out. Later, the marchers assembled outside Trades Hall, where the Nurses Federation was mustering support from other unions. But that support may not be needed. The industrial action is already proving tellingly effective, with 8 hospitals now out of action.
Well, I think I got a $2 a week rise, and I'm grade 1 nurse at the moment. I'm working in the haemodialysis unit, working totally unsupervised, on call 24 hours a day, about every 4 or 5 weeks. We come in and do our patients ourselves, make all the decisions ourselves, but we're, according to the government, totally supervised doing non-specific, non-complicated tasks.
I've dropped back to a grade 1 position, which after being a nurse for 7 years and undergoing post-basic education in critical care, I've dropped back to a grade 1 position, which means I think I've got about a $3 a week rise from what I was actually getting before, but now I'm bottom of the pay scale, bottom of the career structure, and it doesn't really give you very much incentive to go back.
It's been coming for 10 years. You just can't go on like that. For your own sanity, health, bloody financial existence, you've got to bloody fight.
Therefore, I want to make it clear to all the nurse workforce who may be contemplating further industrial action or may be attending the stop work meeting tomorrow that the only course available to them now is via the Commission. They have said for 10 days they wanted negotiations with the government. The government has clearly indicated that we want the matters arbitrated. The Industrial Commission has now said that it is a matter of law that the matters can only be arbitrated and there is no scope for negotiation.
Clearly, the Minister of Health was not serious in wanting to settle the dispute, and as a result of his comments, it made nurses more and more determined than ever that they would stay out for as long as it would take for them to get what they believed was rightly theirs.
We're picketing the inward goods to the hospital from about 7 o'clock until 5 during the day. There are still some goods coming into the hospital. We're still letting emergency medical supplies and drugs through and fresh food. But beyond that, we're stopping everything.
We can't let them through if we don't know what they are.
Well, I can't tell you either, because I'm the last man that would know.
That's all right. That's fine.
Take them away.
Take them away.
There were daily meetings held in RANF, and we used to send a couple of members in each day, and there would be general information toing and froing from everybody there there was a strike bulletin that was issued on a daily basis. Those members would come back to the hospital with the strike bulletin, tell you, and we would have a meeting in the afternoon and they'd tell you what was going on in other hospitals.
And dwell on the positive things that are happening, the strength that is developing amongst nurses, the fact that we are being seen as politically or industrially active.
Good morning. This is the RANF Nurses Update program coming to you from 3CR, Melbourne's only community radio.
Well, it's now day 20. I suppose we're all getting a little bit tired and a little bit frustrated, but the morale, as you can see, is absolutely fantastic. Every day the numbers get bigger, the equipment gets bigger, the catering committee gets better, and we've really made this a little home. People are staying here every night. There's about 20 people staying of all night. So it's really quite like a second home now, and morale is fairly good, but we are getting particularly frustrated about it, I suppose.
Coming in behind you, mate.
That's all right.
I'm back now.
Nice driver. Oh, I'm waiting. Oh, yes.
To go out on strike in a country town of this size as compared to the city is, I think, a great deal of difference. The patient that goes home from this hospital may be the person that comes to your place for dinner next week, may be your aunt, may be your child, and you are accountable for that standard of care for the rest of your life here in the town. You are accountable for all the type of care that your mates at the hospital give. A lot of people consider it's just a monetary thing when we as nurses know this isn't so, that it is standard of care and the future of nursing that we're mostly concerned about, and care for us as patients in the oncoming years, because the chances of me being cared for here in the Wodonga Hospital are very high in the next 10 or 20 years. My family's care will happen here, and so therefore I feel a great responsibility to do something to improve nursing. I have a 15-year-old daughter who's talking of nursing as a career, and I certainly feel that I wouldn't like her to take nursing on as a career as it is today.
I worked at a supermarket before I started nursing, and I earned more money then working Monday to Friday than what I do now. It's ludicrous.
Farmers that I associate with quite a bit all call me a communist, because they don't quite understand either, and farmers don't believe in unions very much, so I get a bit of flack there too.
I've been a nurse for 30 years. I've been here at the Wodonga Hospital for 21 years, and the RANF Council, Irene Bolger, are standing up and publicly saying what we have as nurses have been whinging about around the tea table for at least 20 years.
Well, I was on strike last year, in the industrial action last year, and was on the picket line then, and I got a bit more support then because it wasn't quite as strong, the action wasn't quite as severe as it is this time, and it didn't go on for as long, so yeah. But before I started nursing, I didn't know about unions and striking, you know, that was something that you just didn't do and didn't know about.
When the first truck tried to get through, everybody sat down and linked arms, and the police just came in and started grabbing people by their hair, by their scruff of the necks, by their clothing, and literally dragged them away to let the trucks through. And it was really very unpleasant. A lot of people were hurt.
I think they just wanted to break our backs and make people go back to work and not associate themselves with such violence, and sort of I think, give the union a bad name.
I think it's absolutely essential that the nurses stay out. I would like to see the public, and I'm wondering why the public aren't saying now and demanding of Mr. White, regardless of the merits of the issue, why does this state at this present time not have a viable healthcare system? I think it's morally bankrupt of the government, in fact, to have allowed a strike, to have continued for over 4 weeks now, that this state does not have a healthcare system, and what are they prepared to do about it?
I think initially the picket line were just people holding up signs and things like that, and if somebody had told me then that I'd be spending 24 hours on a picket line and I'd be stopping linen trucks and stuff, I wouldn't have done it. But we're a profession that's been pushed to a limit, and we've really got archaic conditions, and it's sort of the only action that was left, and I think it's brought a real unity.
If that's what it's going to take for the government to sit down and really negotiate, that's what you have to do. I mean, I think people have to realise that we're really quite serious in our claims, and that, I mean, we're not sitting out here to, get a suntan.
We have been fortunate that things haven't gone wrong so far. That's rubbish. Things haven't gone wrong so far because we've made sure there's a skeleton staff in there and that there are exempt areas. Critical care areas are exempt from mass walkouts. That's why things haven't gone wrong, because we haven't allowed them to go wrong with patients.
Well, she has been on call according to our staff.
The health budget's 8.9 of gross domestic product, 8.9%, which is pretty high. Now, if they can actually break nurses psychologically to the point where they want to get out, and I'm on that point now, permanently, not only will the beds that are shut now never be reopened, but more beds will be closed. The health budget will be reduced quite dramatically, and the public aren't going to squeak about it.
been warning the health department and administrations for years that the system's falling apart, and they keep saying, no, everything's fine, everything's running well.
In my view, it's a long-term clever political strategy to reduce the health budget and probably within the next 10 years swing health over to complete privatisation, so it no longer becomes a government problem. That's pretty frightening sort of prospect for people out there who can't afford health care.
The problem is that nursing is not seen as generating money. And this is one of our biggest problems, I think, is that people see us as costing money, not as the fact that we are saving money by reducing mortality and morbidity, and therefore reducing the amount of time that patients spend in the hospitals, which are expensive.
We know what we do is valuable. We know that it improves quality of life, but the powers that be don't seem to be terribly interested in that input.
We are not perceived as being economic necessities. They might change their minds.
Maybe what we do need to do is pull out all stops and bring it to a crisis. I think nurses have been very naive to believe that when they withdrew their labour that the health department would care.
It's just, you just can't keep going the way it was before. Something has to be done.
The RANF leadership and some of its members are to be condemned for their bloody-minded attitude in escalating industrial action in critical care areas of Victoria's public hospitals. The Victorian public is entitled to know the real reason why this dispute continues. It can now be clearly stated that it is because of the uncompromising attitude of the RANF leadership. To blame any other party would be totally against the facts.
Even prior to the dispute, Casualty had up to 7 to 10 patients waiting for beds overnight, and sometimes up to 3 days. Now I'm from a surgical ward. Now on average it's a 30-bed ward. We had 23, 24 beds open. That's all we could open because of lack of nursing staff. And you've got patients sitting down in Casualty waiting for beds, knowing that up on the ward you have got empty beds, but you haven't got the staff to look after them when they get to the ward. And that's been like that well before the dispute started. It's been like that for a long time.
I don't think it's been made obvious that our unit has still got a person there manning our emergency trolley for the hospital, that we are also still open to accept any internal emergencies from the obstetrics section or cardiac arrest. Renal transplants will also be taken care of in this situation. In general, the public have been pretty well manipulated by the media in this situation, and if public opinion is the only thing we take notice of in solving this dispute, then there is going to be no nursing career structure for the future. So if the question is where are the sick patients going to go now, where are they going to go in the future?
Now, from my point of view, they have every right to do whatever they wish to bring this matter to a resolution, and if it means that they have to walk out of those areas to do that, that's what they do.
I think the girls had just had enough. It had gone on a long time. Labour ward was busy. They were working on a basic staff. And as far as we could see, there was nothing happening in the commission.
The radical step we have taken has been brought about by a radical situation that has been developing in our nursing, in our hospitals in general for the last 4 or 5 years, to the extent the unit here at Queen Vic, being a 5-bed unit, has never been staffed for more than 3 beds since I started here, and the situation has arisen on a couple of occasions where no staff have turned up for the next shift. People have had to do double shifts and be supported by nurses from elsewhere in the hospital who have no knowledge of an intensive care area or how to read any of the monitors or use any of the equipment. They're there purely and simply to keep the trained staff member awake so that they can make it through a double shift. It's not common just to this hospital. I've worked in the Royal Melbourne unit where I've been the only trained staff member on with 9 ventilated patients out of 10, and had 7 people sent who have never worked in an intensive care area before. This was 2 years ago, not during our strike, not during any industrial action. This is during normal nursing times. So the situation's not improving, and unless something drastic is done, it's never going to improve, and eventually there won't be any people doing this job at all.
I really hope that we don't get too excited and jump in ahead and go back before we have some signed agreement, because I think from the weekend Mr White's attitude of total contempt for us, bringing legislating for SENs to be able to do our duties is just an indication of how much we can't trust him.
We've always been soft and politically naive, and I think we've all grown up a lot.
I don't think we can go back on a verbal response, because the Minister's shown, I think, in the past of his inability to make any sort of dialogue with nurses, and it's only been over the last couple of days when there's been a lot of pressure applied to him that he's finally responded in a positive manner.
the decision. Yeah, I think it's a good decision and come out fighting again when we need to if they don't give us what we want.
That's right.
But I think that actually we'll go on and we'll maintain our rage because people have been politicised through this.
I'm very disappointed. I mean, I would have been prepared to wait out a lot longer than this.
Give the Commission the opportunity to bring down a favourable decision and reassess the situation.
It's going to take, a long time, but it's the beginning, and it's good.
Last year when they said it was impossible for nurses to strike, we had a 5-day strike, and then when they stood some people down here over some elective bans in August, they said nurses will never do anything, and 170 registered nurses resigned. They said we'd never do that. And they said that we'd never strike again, and we did that. And they said that we'd never walk out, and we did that. And they said that we'd never hang in there for more than a day or two, and we've been out here for 50 days.
I think that they realise that we are not a subservient bunch of women who will go along with whatever they say. I think that they realise now that we'll stand up and we'll fight and we'll strike if need be again. And next time it'll be twice as strong as what it was this time.
Pop your knees down just a little bit. Right. Now we want your arms down our back. Okay? Hand the back. Yes, onto our shoulders. Right. That's 1 down to 3. How's that? Good. Start there and go back up the leg.
This way?
Yep. In actual fact, we have got the infection under control, haven't we? Okay.
Got 2 years.
But I think we have to remember that the real enemy is the status quo of the healthcare system and the powers that be in that, and that is the medical profession, and that they have no interest in nurses becoming industrially aware, in flexing their industrial or professional muscle and making a contribution and a critique on how medicine is delivered in this state.
I think the issues that need to be addressed in nursing cover things like the introduction of democracy into the health system overall, that nursing needs to be recognised as a separate profession to medicine. They complement each other, but they certainly are separate. And that nurses need to be able to function autonomously and with authority without the approval of other health professionals.
We're in a state of great change right now. We're in the middle of it. Nothing has actually totally been resolved. We're right in the middle of the change. We have it in our own hands, the direction that nursing goes in, and we have to be absolutely aware of that and aware of the responsibility that nurses today have about that, because what happens in the next 5 years will be what happens in nursing for many years to come.